guess I'll at least intro the video for whenever Rocky decides to hop in. And all right, guys, welcome to the 8th episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comic book community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, adaptations, we hit it all. This week, we'll be having our normal partner in crime, ComicBoom, join us. I guess he's running a little bit late for work, so just going to get the basic introduction started off. So this week, we figured that with all of the hype around Justice League, and now that all of the Justice League books are in publication, we figured it'd be a pretty good topic to discuss, seeing as New York Comic Con is this weekend, and I'm sure they're going to be rolling out a little bit more information as to what's going to be going on in the near future and what's going to be going on over the course of 2019. So yeah, I mean, I figured it was, now's a pretty good time to get an idea and give our thoughts on what's going on currently and where we think things are going. But as always, we do our pull of the week here, which is just a book that we're excited to check out this week, or a book that we've read that we were really excited about. I actually haven't read anything from this week yet, but I guess par for the course, I'm gonna have to say the Wonder Woman Justice League Dark Witching Hour crossover. For those of you guys who aren't caught up on Justice League Dark, it's really good. They're only on issue 3 plus this tie-in, so you don't really have a lot to catch up with. It's been really, really interesting. I feel like Justice League Dark is pulling in this very Vertigo-esque style into the DC universe. So, what's going on, Boom?
Well, not much, man. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. We're live. I was just doing my pull of the week, getting that started. But yeah, as I was telling the people in the chat that I haven't gotten to read the Witching Hour crossover yet, but I'm pretty excited to check that out because I am caught up with Odyssey and Justice League Dark. So I'm excited to see where they go from. I feel like tonally they're bringing back a lot of Vertigo-esque quality and content. So
Yeah,
that should be.
Well, I just picked up I literally just got back home. It's 5:30 here, so I'm just getting back from work. But yeah, I haven't read the Witching Hour yet. I read the solicits. I mean, I can state what the solicits say, which I don't think is a spoiler if you've read Justice League Dark. Obviously, Wonder Woman has a new power, and I like the concept of it. I really like it. Makes Wonder Woman more interesting. It reminds me of back of in the New 52 Wonder Woman, where she became the God of War.
Mm.
It actually makes her interesting. There's something really cool about a woman who embodies love and compassion, to be basically harboring within her some evil and dark magic. And what better place to hide dark magic than in somebody like Wonder Woman? Who'd think to look there? I mean, it's actually a pretty good idea. And I'm actually curious to know whose idea it is. I'm assuming it was James Tynion Fourth's idea, since he's writing Justice League Dark and The Witching Hour. So it's pretty good. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, I mean the last issue of Justice League Dark was really cool, a little bit unexpected. So we'll see where it goes from here. But I like how I feel like everything that Tynion is including in that book has a purpose, and I really like that. It's very old school Snyder-esque, which I mean obviously I love Scott Snyder, so I'm really interested to see what Tynion is going to be doing. And again, characterization is top notch, man. Like if he did like a Hellblazer Swamp Thing kind of book, I would be totally into it. That would be, I mean,
well, I think you make a good point when we're talking about James Tynion. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't James Tynion, he wrote the issue 8 of Justice League?
Yeah, he did. He wrote issue 8 and issue 5, I believe, of Justice League.
Right, and I think that he does seem to have a gift. He seems to be slightly better at it, at sort of explaining complex concepts or some sophisticated plot lines a little bit better than Scott Snyder is. And it's nice that Scott Snyder even tacitly acknowledges that, and they work so well together. Snyder sort of builds up he's got great concepts, and then every now and then Tynion comes in and sort of elucidates the concept a little bit more for the reader. It's a nice combination.
Yeah. So would you say The Witching Hour is your pull of the week this week?
Well, you know what? I'm. It might end up being my pull of the week, but I'm actually excited about another pull, also Wonder Woman related. Uh, Volume 2 of Grant Morrison's Earth One Wonder Woman came out. It's
Hmm.
still wrapped up here. I haven't read it. I had sort of some mixed feelings on Volume 1, but I'm really curious to see what Grant Morrison has in store for Wonder Woman on another Earth in the multiverse, specifically Earth One. So it's I'm not sure if there's some. I might be corrected on this. Somebody told me that these are completely out of continuity, so maybe this isn't even one of the Earths in the multiverse. It might, because I think the Green Lantern Earth One is completely divorced from continuity,
Well,
according to
they're both.
Gabriel Hardman, the writer. But I'm looking forward to reading this.
Yeah, I mean, all of the Earth One books are in like the Earth One continuity, whereas like mainstream is on Earth Prime or Earth Zero. So
Yeah,
they have their own continuity. I'm interested. I'm really interested if once they get like however many characters rolled out, like if they're ever going to do a Justice League Earth One, which I'm sure they'll do. But that's a really curious topic.
yeah, no, it's interesting. In the reason why the continuity on Earth One is a little bit uh, crazy is Gabriel Hardman, when he wrote Green Lantern Earth One. It's not possible to reconcile the Green Lantern Earth One story with the Earth One Titans or the Earth One Superman or the Earth One Wonder Woman. They're out of sync. And Gabriel Hardman in an interview said that the Earth One Green Lantern is technically not on the same Earth One as the 3 volumes of Earth One Superman, the 3 volumes of Earth One Batman, written by Johns. That's what threw me off. Is that he said that in an interview. So, and when you read the story, it's really hard to reconcile the story of Earth One Green Lantern with the other Earth One graphic novels. But I don't know. I don't care. The stories are great. I love it. I mean, I love the idea of sort of a Elseworlds sort of way of looking at things. So it's pretty good stuff. And eventually, I'm sure there will be a Justice League.
Yeah, and as an honorable mention too, I don't want to get up and mess my whole rig up, but I got the Anatomy of a Metahuman book
Oh man, I
that
wanted
came
to
out.
get that. Is it good?
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to read through it because it just came in yesterday. But I mean, like visually, it's stunning. Like I've seen Ming Doyle's art before, but like this is Ming Doyle, like at the top of career. Like it is a solid looking book, and the fact that like it makes sense, right? Because Batman has a contingency on pretty much everybody in the DC universe. This is all told from Batman's perspective, which
Yeah.
I love. Like I've wanted a book like this for so long, so I'm really excited to have it. The binding is beautiful. It's just like a nice big. I don't want to say picture book, but picture book. It's like a biology book. It's like one of my biology textbooks, but for the DC universe. So it's like combining my like career choices with my hobbies. So I really, really like the book.
Yeah. No, I'm actually kind of curious to read it. I'm really curious to see how creative the writer is. Who's the writer? Do you know?
SD something. I want to say it's like Safine or something like that. And there's another writer. There's a secondary writer too, but I want to say it's like SD Safine or something like that.
Because what would really make me curious about something like that is just, if maybe does Superman or Martian Manhunter have an extra organ in their body, or like does the appendix or the spleen of Superman, the spleen in the normal human body provides us with emergency blood supply when we need it, but maybe in Superman it's a reserve for solar power as well as blood and all this other jazz. I'm just kind of curious to see how it's different.
Yeah, on the cover, there are like these little thumbnails. I'm like looking at it right now. It shows like the sternums of like Cyborg, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman. And I can't make out what the top corner is, but it looks really cool. Like, for example, Victor Stone, Cyborg, his anatomy is like robotic piping, like replacing some of like the veins and like the arteries and such. So I think that's really cool. I'm excited to crack that baby open, but that'll probably have to wait until sometime next week because
Yeah,
New
and
York Comic Con.
we should give a shout out too. Maybe you already did, because I apologize for being a little late. But the foil covers or whatever they are, I mean, they're really nice. I mean, they feel
And
a little
they're
bit differently. And
And
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was to say, and like kudos to DC for not upcharging for those covers.
That's exactly right. Although I did note, did you notice on the Batman cover? Apparently, there seems to be a defect on all of them. There's that same defect right by his hand. I was curious to know if you had the defect right by Batman's hand.
I won't be able to pick up my books until tomorrow.
Yeah,
Be,
because
but
yeah, but just keep an eye on that. Apparently, there's a lot of the retailers on Twitter across North America have noticed the same defect.
huh,
A little indentation by the hand. That's how come I normally I complain to my retailer and he's pretty good at replacing it, but all his had the same defect. So I
that's a
mean, I still
pain.
bought it. I'm not that picky. I want to buy it and read it, but
Yeah, the cover looks good though. Like all those covers, like the Green Arrow one looks really good too. I'm excited to like
yeah,
actually get them in my hands.
yeah, they're definitely beautiful. Yeah, they definitely there's definitely a common color of green in the DC universe, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're using it as some sort of metaphor for life or something. But I think with all that being said, I think we could probably jump into the topic, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Cool. So now that I have my partner in crime here, just to rebreeze over what we're doing, we figured that with all the Justice League titles moving out and with all of them now being in publication, and we figured now might be the time to just give a little brief chat where we think it's going, how we feel about things so far, even though Justice League Odyssey is only on issue 1, so we're definitely going to give it a break. But Justice League just hit its 9th issue. Justice League Dark, if you count the Witching Hour crossover, has had 4 books. And with New York Comic Con being this weekend, I have a very strong feeling that they're going to announce a couple I have a feeling a couple of the big topics are going to be how the Justice League, I guess you can call it a publication line, the Justice League sphere is going to be impacting the greater DC universe.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that. I'm looking forward to that. I haven't. One of the things we probably could have done. I apologize. I wish I had more time. I would have done this. I'm one way that we can cheat. We can always look at future solicits of the
Hmm.
Justice League titles. I've not done that. I probably should have because they always give a little bit of a. You can sort of infer some hints as to where the direction the stories might be going. But it's I will say this as a general starting point to sort of start us off is I'm I'm increasingly impressed. I had some trepidation. I was a little bit disappointed with what I thought was a little bit maybe too confusing a narrative in Snyder's Justice League, but it's gotten better. The holes are starting to fill in. Some of the gaps are starting to fill in, and I'm feeling a lot better about it. In particular, I'm really feeling good. Justice League Dark really surprised me.
Oh,
That really surprised me, and I actually quite enjoyed Justice League Odyssey too, despite some of its. It actually has a couple of. I don't know if you noticed this, but Justice League Odyssey. Did you notice that the writer Joshua Williamson screwed up and he referred to the Guardians as being on Oa? As
yep.
opposed to there was actually an obvious continuity error that the editors never picked up.
Well,
Uh,
I also think too, not to jump in too hard. I think Justice League Odyssey, like it shows that they had to scrap the first 2 books that were finished. Like the Cedric, I love Cedric, but his art's not consistent, and I don't blame him because they probably had to rush him to get it out. But
yeah,
there are some beautiful scenes in Justice League Odyssey, and there are others where it's like, holy shit, like it looks like you tried to draw like 2 or 3 pages in one day.
yeah, yeah, and it's there's definitely some narrative storytelling glitches where I think to myself, well, that seems rather curious. Like, for example, in Justice League Odyssey, I think it's a really cool concept that flowing out of Justice League No Justice, that there's this ghost sector now of these planets that were, in the past they were hidden and shrunk on the planet of Kolu, and now they've expanded and now they're located in the ghost sector.
Well, it's
I
like
find it very.
I
Sorry, go
just
ahead.
think it's weird because they kind of did it twice. Like they did it in the Wild Hunt. You remember how they were using like baby universes to like power their ship, and they released it then, and then they released it. They released more planets, which is now called the Ghost Sector in No Justice. So it's like I don't quite understand like where like this feels very Grant Morrison. Like I don't know
Yeah,
if they're separate, if they're like fractioned off. Like, what the hell's going on with that? But
That's a really good point. I completely forgot about Wild Hunt. I'm gonna have to go back and read that again.
oh my Lanta, that book was that book was something.
Yeah. Well, all of those sort of metal books are a little bit, they're not. Well, at least I personally never. I don't find them easy to remember. I don't immediately recall the content of all of them. Uh, I guess I have to go back and reread. I just I didn't find that to be again, not to put down Snyder or anything, but I mean it's one of those
No,
things I definitely have to go back and reread.
oh yeah, I don't blame you, man. Like between metal going into no justice, like forgive my French, but that was a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Like there was so much, and I get he's like throwing everything at the wall and whatever, and I have enough. I guess I have enough faith in Snyder to wait it out and hope that he can connect all the dots. But he's also one of those writers that never seems to fully connect the dots because he always seems like he's building something. And in
Yeah.
this situation, with everything being so grand and huge, I don't honestly know if I like that. You know,
Yeah.
um, but we'll see.
Yeah, one of the things that I find very very interesting, and I don't know if I'm curious to know what you think, but with Justice League Odyssey, it's very obvious to me, and I'll just put it this way: Joshua Williamson is clearly not familiar with the rebirth continuity of Starfire or Cyborg, and he clearly is still thinking he's. It's almost like he wrote Starfire and Cyborg. He wrote them like they talked as if they were teammates, and they're
I
not.
knew you were. Yep.
They just clearly are not that at all. And but I mean, I don't mind it. And the funny thing is that I'm making this comment, and I'm not going to take credit for it because I never even noticed it because I, I miss the Cyborg. I miss the old Wolfman, George Perez, Mark uh, uh, Wolfman team. So I love the fact that Starfire and Cyborg talk as if they used to be teammates, even though technically that's not actually in continuity. And
Yeah,
I like that Williamson is doing that because it's just the way I think that it just feels better to me, and that's just me being old school. But I was curious if you're maybe not as old school as I am. I was curious how you felt about it.
well, they played with that in Metal too. One of those Bats Out of Hell tie-ins. They were like, Raven has some sort of relationship with Cyborg. The
Yeah,
fuck, when did that happen? That's like, I you see. Here's the thing: I get that they're like reintroducing hyper time, and hyper time still exists, but like, clarify. Like, just let me know. Oh, like because Cyborg, like actually, it doesn't make sense that Starfire was the one to make the comment. It would have made sense if Cyborg was the one to make the comment about them being teammates, because at least like in headcanon, you could think, okay, well maybe because he has access to this mother box that also has access to like the Kaluan library, maybe he has a knowledge of hyper time and what had gone down. Like, but like it's stuff like that kind of bothers me. I
yeah,
get you're going for something this optimistic, but I feel like if you really want to make a story this big succeed, you have to have that awareness of what you're doing. Because it also kind of bothered me in Bats Out of Hell when they were just like Cyborg and Raven were homies, but like Raven's like 14, like 15 maybe, and then
yeah,
like suddenly after Metal they aged her up so she could be with the Titans. But like 5 minutes ago, she was like all lovey-dovey with Wallace West, the new 52 Wally West, who is also like 13, 14. So
yeah.
like they feel like I feel like what DC, like they don't have a collective consciousness of what to do with these characters because they're not Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, so on and so forth. They're just kind of like, okay, well, some people have been reading onto this rebirth era, for these younger members, and this is what they know. But also, like the old fans are coming back. You need to find a middle ground or stick with one of them. I don't care what you do at this point, just stick to something. Um, Largely though, I thought Odyssey was pretty good. I don't remember. Maybe you or Taylor in the chat can remind me how like did something happen at the end of Tynan's Detective to where like Azrael, like some sort of indication of Azrael being involved here was dropped.
I honestly don't. I don't remember. I
Yeah,
actually detective is at this point. I don't recall that. I really don't.
I don't
I
either.
think this is sort of. I actually think this is out of the blue. I really don't recall that happened, but it, yeah, I would have to go back and look, but I do not recall anything specific. No.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, we've known since the beginning of the solicitation for this book that he was going to be a part of it. So, but I realize that there's no, like, maybe they'll explain it. It's Williamson, so I doubt he will. But
Mhm.
maybe they'll explain how he got involved, because at the end of, I mean, even Taylor says no, he doesn't remember them doing that. But as far as I remember, at the end of Tynan's Detective, the whole Brother Eye thing blew over, and everybody was cool, and like, I mean, I don't know. It's like they have all this communication between like Snyder, Williamson, and Tynan in particular. You would have thought that like maybe Tynan would have set up Azrael going to do this Odyssey thing. Um,
Yeah,
well,
it's a very curious choice. I think on the one hand, I mean it's hard to imagine a more eclectic group of people that all apparently, at least three of them, Cyborg, Starfire, and Azrael, they're very random characters, and yet somehow we are to believe that they are old gods or the reincarnation of old gods.
I
That's
thought that, yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Or what was your
Yeah, no,
understanding?
they're supposedly like the old, like members of the old gods.
I don't know how that can be though. It's not like they were born old gods. So I didn't
Yeah,
quite get that.
being that, that was like the last page reveal, I assume, that's something that they're going to explain, because that was so like, there are some things that, like, for example, Azrael joining the team, whether or not that gets completely flushed out is whatever, but I feel like because they put so much emphasis on that, because that was the cliffhanger, that's something that we're probably going to get an explanation for. So I'm not like, my pants aren't like in a bunch over that right now. I feel like that's something we're going to get. I think it's weird. Granted, I'm not a professional writer, so I can't say, oh, well, I have no idea how they're going to do this, because I'm sure, he's written plenty of things I would never think of, and made them work. But I don't see how they're going to make this a cohesive thing. I don't, unless Darkseid somehow, like, I'm gonna call him, like, I really hope that what they do with this Darkseid is gonna be like what they did with Teenage Groot in Guardians. Um, but
Yeah.
well, I mean, I don't know if he used the anti-life equation to manipulate these people. I don't know what the hell he did. Um, but we'll
Well,
see. Like I said, I'm not
well,
super up in arms about it.
well, if I can draw some reasonable inferences. Well, at this point in time, I could be completely wrong, but
Hmm.
just some speculations based on what we do know. Uh, Coriander, Starfire, her father is missing, and that's King Commander, whatever his name is, King Commandy. He's actually missing, and he used to be a member of the Circle. Remember in the pages of Superman, Brian Bendis' Superman, her father was a member of
Oh yeah.
the Circle, that cabal, and he's one of the persons responsible for Rogol Zar and the minglings between the Circle and Rogol Zar, which ultimately led to the destruction of Krypton. The Circle existed for many, I'm guessing, thousands of years. I'm not sure how long it existed. I'm speculating that it was for a significant period of time. So
Right.
it makes sense to me that if you're an old god, or if nefarious forces are looking to hide or contain the embodiment of an old god or spirit of an old god, doing it with the king of Tamaran's daughters, namely Starfire, that would make sense to me. In some, I'm sure they could narratively draw on that. That kind of makes sense. Also, with respect to Cyborg, since he's got the mother box, he's got the connection to Apocalypse, so I can see a connection being there. But what is less known to me is Azrael. He's got a connection to Saint Dumas, which is probably a religious order on Earth. How that has an interstellar connection, that I
Uh,
don't know, but I
Well, I
assume
mean,
that will be
maybe
explained.
it's a cosmic thing. I mean, the order. Now that you bring that up, it actually sparks like the cogs are kind of moving now. I mean, in what was it, Batman and Robin Eternal, when they really started playing with a lot of Azrael's current chronology,
Yeah.
I mean, they were an incredibly advanced race of people, or faith of people, group of people, however you want to word it. And yeah, I mean, it could be possible that their entire clan was spawned from some sort of extra terrestrial activity. Maybe their deity is not of Earth. You know,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't a maybe he really wasn't a religious body, but rather, you know, an alien coming from another planet who kind of I guess put out the image that they were a god, or people it's kind of like almost how like when Thor, you know, in earlier Marvel continuity appears to the people, that's when like the Norse mythology and the religion of Nordic culture began. But like once Thor stopped showing up, you know, the Norse religion became more of a mythology. Maybe it's something similar to that, you know, some sort of being came from another planet, brought this technology. People thought they were God, and that's how we got the Order of Saint Dumas. Because as far as we know, the Order of Saint Dumas existed for hundreds of years, if not thousands.
Yeah. Yeah. And finally, the sort of the fourth character that does not appear to be an old god, at least so far, based on the first issue, is Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern. What's a little bit, I think, what I found curious about her involvement in the series is I found it really hard to believe that the Guardians, if there's suddenly an entire new galaxy of planets that appeared, that they're going to appoint their most rookie Green Lantern to be to guard the Ghost Sector. I thought that sort of surprised me. That felt maybe a little bit forced, but again, obviously they're playing very fast and loose with the continuity here. They just want to set this up and they want to get the ball rolling. And I get a sense that I think, and again, could be wrong, but maybe they're moving toward the same direction with all the Justice League titles, because when you've got these old gods being reincarnated with those characters, and then you've got a Darkseid right there, and Darkseid is the epitome. He's an old god himself, but he's battled the new gods, and he wants to get control of the new multiverse. We got to remember that Darkseid made reference to his exact words at the end of Justice League Odyssey. His exact words on the final panel, and I'll just read it. He said, and now we have you three are the old gods. It's your destiny to save the Ghost Sector. I called the goddess, the machine, and the angel to finally bring forth a new age of the multiverse. Now, I think what people have to remember is that the multiverse, at least when it was 52 Earths, there was different incarnations of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, etc. But there was only one Darkseid. And so if there is a new multiverse, you can bet that this revitalized Darkseid out of the pages of Wonder Woman, I'm sure he wants to be at the forefront of it. So it actually makes a lot of sense that this is going to be something that Darkseid is going to be at the forefront of. And what's even more interesting is that is Darkseid aware? He made reference to his father telling him the story of the Source Wall. I wonder if Darkseid is aware of what the Batman Who Laughs is aware of, namely Perpetua, the woman trapped who used to have control of the seven forces, who is currently trapped within the totality in the pages of Justice League written by Snyder. So I think this is all connected.
Yeah, and actually, now that you also brought that up, I don't think it was an alien. I think perhaps an old god might have appeared on Earth, and that is probably what the Order of Saint Dumas, what their faith system is based
Good point.
upon. That's the only thing I can think of that would like logically tie him. Like he's the descendant of the angel Azrael, or he is Azrael, the agent of potentially this old god. So maybe that's the thing. But I mean, we'll see. You know, like I said, I really don't know. I don't have like a really concrete theory on what the hell's going on with those three suddenly being old gods. But because it is obviously the big climax of the first issue, I think if anything in this issue is explored, that is probably going to be it. So we'll see. I really hope that I have the I do either you or Taylor know if they've announced the artist that's coming onto the book after Cedric leaves?
No, I don't know. I was
Hmm.
actually I was really disappointed. I haven't been I haven't been I haven't really been cheating lately by looking at future solicits, so I don't know. Um, I'm behind on my. I always listen to Weird Science DC podcast. They always do the news and they read the future solicits, but I haven't listened for a couple of weeks, so I'm out of the loop. Uh, I don't know, but it's looking at this gorgeous art in Justice League Odyssey. I mean, I'm definitely it's gorgeous. I mean, that picture of Darkseid,
But some of
just
it's really cool, but
it's really good.
for me, there are some spots where I feel like Cedric kind of drops the ball, and I don't blame him for it because I know DC literally scrapped two entire issues because of some sort of script change, which I assume has something to do with the Doomsday Clock delays and how like the results of like this whole metal narrative going into Justice League is going to impact the DC universe versus how Doomsday Clock is going to impact it.
Yeah.
But there were definitely some spots, like for example, a lot of his compositions get kind of lazy. There are a couple spots with like flat one colored backgrounds, like the page where or one of the pages where Jessica's talking to that hologram of Simon. Like there's a straight up white background. Like where did that come from? Straight up, you know. There's a couple times where like I think the directing, like one of the things that I've come to notice, especially after talking to quite a few artists, is how the impact of a comic book artist is also to direct the scene. And I don't know, maybe Williamson is oddly very specific about the way he wants the composition of the panels, but I just don't think the direction of it and the pace of it feels super cohesive. You know what I mean?
I yeah, you explain yourself well. I actually think that you know I think Sajik did a actually not a bad job at all.
I mean,
But I
I
understand. I recognize. I found the scene you're talking about. It's not perfect, but what actually impressed me about this first issue is how much they. I like that they didn't piss around. Like to use an example, I'll pick on Bendis, and I don't. I think Bendis is doing a decent job on Superman, but I'm going to pick on him anyway. Um, to me, it would take Bendis six issues to get to what this issue did in one issue. Do you know what I mean? You know
yeah,
what I
no,
mean?
that's a good
I mean,
point.
Bendis would have had Starfire and Cyborg talk for 3 straight issues, and Jessica Cruz, talk for another one, and then at the on the sixth issue we'd see Darkseid. I liked how much was accomplished in one issue. It got right to the point. There's the Ghost Sector. It's summarized in a couple lines. Oh, by the way, these planets are enlarged. They're in the Ghost Sector. That's all you really need to know. You don't really need to know the backstory. No Justice. That's what I like about it. Just short, sweet, to the point. Now let's get to the action. We got Darkseid at the end, and now we're up and running, and boom, we're off to the races. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be my taste in storytelling. You know, I like things when they're oddly specific. I would honestly sometimes rather take the time to explain things than to just kind of like locomotive, through everything. Um, so I will see. It's weird because I feel a little bit like restraint in saying that because I do love some great DC cosmic books, but most notably Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, but he does go out of his way to not only incorporate these crazy, like fast-paced scenes, he also exposits a lot and explains a lot of what's going on.
Let me ask you this, because I find it interesting that the first thing I noticed on the cover was Darkseid sort of staring into like a crystal, looks like a crystal ball, and it looks like it has a universe in it or something. And what I find interesting about that is, what is that? Because it's not in the first issue. What is
I
that?
I think it's just like I honestly one of the things that I hope I'm wrong about. It seems blatantly obvious that like Darkseid has an agenda of his own here, and that like even though he's a member of the team, he's not really a member of the team. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like that's some sort of indicator that like he's kind of behind some of this. Like he's trying to probably recover some sort of hidden power from the happenings
Yeah.
of No Justice and Metal and
But
all of the events that have been
don't you
going
want
on.
that though? I'm hoping that's the case, because to me, like I said before, my bias is And by the way, they changed Darkseid's appearance here
I
too.
like it. I like his costume.
I don't mind it. I didn't like some of the concept art, but I like it the way Sajak has drawn it anyway. I like it, but my point being is I want him to be Thanos level. I mean, he bloody well should be devious. He should pull the wool over their eyes. He should have an agenda.
No,
He's
I know,
Darkseid.
but I was kind of hoping like he would pull the wool over our eyes too. You know, it just feels way too obvious. Like, a villain conveniently joins your team, and he's got a, you know, it's. I wish they were able to pull that over. Like, I wish Williamson had the skill to pull that over our eyes too. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, and again, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Darkseid is really in it to help the team, but like I think there's like the obvious gesture of, again, or the obvious trope of the villain joining the team and being the one to betray them. There's a couple of the scenes here where you look at how Cedric draws his expression, you know, like at the end of the book, he just has this crazy smile, and he's finally bringing forth a new age to the multiverse with, you know, and then there's again that cover with him holding that dark orb, which looks like some sort of universe or multiverse inside of it. So I hope it's not the obvious. I'm not really willing to forgive as much as you are the sake of like the obvious choices in narrative just for the sake of getting a dark side that I want. You know, I to me, like if you're gonna really step out and do something this big, you should have that a little bit more under control. And I'm not saying I don't want a big, bad, crazy dark side that is on Thanos level, but I'd want them to develop that dark side again in a more cohesive and fluid way instead of just pulling these obvious like character or these obvious storytelling tropes. You know.
Well, if I was to venture a guess, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a guess here, and that is that, in my view, at the end of the day, with the source wall broken, the impression that I've gotten, and I think this is the impression for all the Justice League titles. Well, in fact, all the DC titles, period, Wonder Woman, Flash, all of them, is that whatever come out from the source wall, once it fell down, is that it's more evil than even the worst evils we're accustomed to. And with Darkseid being on the Justice League team, I think it's a question of, would you rather side with the devil you know or the one you don't? Because the one you don't behind the source wall, so far what we're seeing is that might be far worse than Darkseid. Because with Darkseid, he expects servitude, but he doesn't. Darkseid isn't going to exterminate the entire multiverse. He's not going to throw it. You know, it might go into darkness, but you know, at least you'll be a servant. You're not going to be exterminated. So I look at it in terms of neither one is a good option for anybody. But to me, it's a question of, I think whatever's behind the source wall, I think it's something for that. Even if Vandal Savage himself was afraid of the totality and what it was, I mean, that should tell you something, that, you know, there's something about it. I think there's still some missing pieces, some evil here that we need to figure out, you know, where is it all going? And Darkseid, I think Darkseid knows more about what's going on behind the source wall, because I think Darkseid's father, if you remember, Darkseid's father used to be trapped in the source wall. I think when he became part of the source wall. So when the source wall came down, I mean, Darkseid's father was obviously had a lot of knowledge and probably has a lot. We might even see Darkseid's father. Darkseid's father might be alive.
I wouldn't be surprised because they've mentioned Yuga Khan on a couple of occasions. I think that maybe name dropped him once, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised. That would be a huge threat. And one of the things I wonder, and I've been thinking about now, is I wonder if the greater evils coming from both Justice League Dark, like the Upside Down Man and the original creators of magic, and whatever's coming for us from JLO, maybe Yuga Khan and some of the old gods that were sealed within the source wall. I wonder if there's going to be some sort of collaborative attempt by all of these big bad groups spawning from outside the source wall against the multiverse, to where the Justice League has to defend it. Because that'd be kind of wild, because they say, you know, when you see all these interviews and such, all three of the writers of each of the Justice League books say that there is some level of overarching narrative between the three of them. And they said that they've already hinted at it. And besides potentially, the originators of magic and the potentially again the old gods we don't know, and
Yeah.
like the Legion of Doom, I wonder if there's going to be some sort of collaborative attempt to
I,
affect the multiverse.
I think there is, and I talked about this in my commentary when I did my review of Doomsday Clock #7, and I'll just say it here. And this is might be a little bit wild, but in Doomsday Clock #7, Doctor Manhattan claims to have he can exist in different places at once between the year 1959, and he can only see 1 month in the future, where he envisions or thinks he sees a battle between him and Superman, and he speculates that he might die either being killed by Superman or something happens because he can't see more than 1 month in the future. And he says that when he first came to our universe, he saw the person who embodied hope. And you think he's talking about Superman, and then he said he saw the hope turn to hopelessness. And then it later showed a Superman with glowing red eyes. And my theory is that what he saw was not Superman, but Superboy Prime. And that I think we might see Superboy Prime in the pages of Doomsday Clock as being the one who is actually the bad guy. Everyone's assuming that Dr. Manhattan is the reason why the New 52 universe was created. Everyone's assuming that it's Dr. Manhattan that is the one pulling the strings. But so far, Dr. Manhattan, he doesn't come across like an evil guy. So I think there's another force there. It wouldn't surprise me if it's Superboy Prime. Snyder's already hinted at Superboy Prime in the pages of Justice League. I think that would make sense. And that might be a little bit of a wild theory, but I will say this: Jeff Johns loved Superboy Prime. In Infinite Crisis started off as being about a story about what happens when the Trinity doesn't get along, and it became nothing but a Superboy Prime punch fest. And so it wouldn't surprise me. And Jeff Johns, of course, is writing Doomsday Clock. So I just thought I'd put that out there because I think that would be another way of sort of unifying all these narratives, and it might explain the delay in Justice League Odyssey.
No, I think most everything you said makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I think I I would probably disagree with is Superboy Prime being behind Manhattan, because if Superboy Prime would have made his way out of the source wall post Metal. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that he's behind Manhattan. I still think it's Ozymandias. I think him playing stupid is kind of a farce. But
it could be. Yeah, and I'm not saying Dr. Manhattan is Superboy Prime. I'm saying Superboy Prime is whatever happened after whatever happened to Superboy Prime. We don't know what really happened to Superboy Prime after Flashpoint. What happened? So I mean, what he's been up to. It's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to bring Superboy Prime back. But you can bet when they do, it's going to be. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, obviously you and I were just shooting the shit here. We're just theorizing. There's so many moving parts to all this, and I just don't. What I really think DC's doing a good job doing, though, at this point is, I'm enjoying the Justice League titles individually, and yet we can also talk about them collectively, and there's still some synchronicity there, and we can still kind of see they're connected in a way. We're not sure how, because we're speculating and having fun doing that, but I like the end. I'm enjoying the parts, and I'm enjoying the whole. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are some things that I definitely have problems with that I've expressed on a couple of occasions. Mostly, honestly, with the main Justice League title, Justice League Dark, I've had little to no problems with, and by little to no, I mean pretty much none. And I guess that's a good segue to kind of change the focus of discussion into Justice League Dark. I think that the book has been doing a lot of things that DC has failed to do since Vertigo kind of started going by the wayside. We're getting a strong sense of DC's mystic universe and how it ties into everything. And Tynan's not afraid to really poke at some things. Spoilers for the most recent issue of Justice League Dark. He had pointed to the fact that what's the word I'm looking for? That Constantine's conduit to magic is injecting demon's blood in himself, and that's how he's able to manipulate the different forces of magic. And at some point, the Upside Down Man literally like he freaking Magneto. Like what Magneto did when he ripped the adamantium out of Wolverine, he used his magic to tear the demonic blood out of Constantine. And I think it's great. We're getting a larger sense of the DC Mystic and how that's going to tie into whatever else is going on in the DC universe. The characterization is spot on. The only one that I think is a little bit off is Kirk Langstrom, but he largely doesn't have much of a character, I guess, outside of this. He's one of those villains that hasn't really been super developed, so I'm not super offended about it. It seems a little bit like he's just there to kind of fill the role as like Mr. Jokes, but I think that he gets every other character down to a T. I love his Constantine. I love his Swamp Thing. I love his Detective Chimp. Like when I read his Detective Chimp, I kind of read it in the voice of like an old raspy man from Brooklyn.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. The Detective Chimp is. I'm actually not that a huge fan of Bibbo the Detective Chimp. But I don't mind it. It's all right. What most impressed me in the latest issue that I've never been. Honestly, I'm more interested in. I was really impressed with the first page describing Zatanna as a young girl, all the training. I never appreciated. To be blunt, I always thought Zatanna was kind of a joke. I thought she was just this good looking chick that she looked good in some nylon stockings, and she wore a cat, and she had a nice rack on her. And she's decent to look at, but she talks backwards, but whoop-de-doo. But I actually have more respect for her, that her father training her relentlessly to work magic. And then at the end of every day, having her do the same tricks, but without being able to use the very thing he spent the whole day teaching her. And then the training, it sounded like she went. I have a whole new respect for Zatanna now that I never had before. And I have a great respect for her father, Zatara, in terms of how the level of aggression he had in training her. And the brilliance of James Tynion's writing is that there's a purpose for that. And the purpose for that is that he was preparing her for the potential release of the darkness from the source wall that's not only behind the source wall, but is hidden in Wonder Woman. And that's what's cool, is that it's leaking out of Wonder Woman, I think.
Well, that's like what I was alluding to. I don't remember if you were here when I was saying it earlier, but I had mentioned that it feels that everything that Tynan's including in Justice League Dark has a purpose. Everything has a purpose, and he's going to develop on it at some point. And immediately there, again, I have that same appreciation for that first page because, I'm not going to say too much because it'll just be reiterating what you said, but you really get that sense of Zatara preparing her for what's to come. He knows what's coming, and he was ultimately destroyed by it because he looked too far. I just think that the way they establish, again, Zatanna as a character that's a little bit more than just someone who says words backwards is awesome. Tynan generally does a really good job at retconning characters and making them feel way more important. In his Detective Comics run, he brought the old school Tim Drake origin back with a little bit of new school flair to it, which I absolutely love. I love what he was doing in Batman Aram Eternal with the Order of Saint Dumas, and I love what he's doing here. I hope we get to see a little bit more of what's going on with like Swamp Thing and how what's getting him to the point where he no longer wants to be an elemental of the green. But I have a feeling that's something that we're gonna get, and I'm excited to see what happens. With it's funny because I didn't realize that in issue 2, when they had that little prequel or that forward where Wonder Woman as a child is like abducted by these witches on Themyscira. I was like, this is some spooky shit. I
Yeah.
really like this, like this horror element to her, because we've gotten, Wonder Woman made out of clay or the daughter of Zeus, but this is where it really ties in her relationship to magic and how relevant she is to Justice League Dark, and not just being a token Trinity member to throw on this team.
Yeah. I I really like it because I'm a little bit, I'm gonna probably make myself sound a little bit like a cynical bastard when I say this, but one of the things I've always had a little bit of a beef with how Wonder Woman's been written. I've always believed that Wonder Woman is too damn perfect. She's written too perfectly. I don't like this notion that she's this power of love and compassion, and she uses the magic lasso and this, and it's too lovey-dovey. She needs more darkness. The best Wonder Woman incarnation, in my opinion, is when she was the God of War, where she had some struggles between being a peaceful warrior and a God of War. That's more interesting, and I love the idea of her actually having within her dark magic, because it actually makes it more compelling now. She's a more interesting character. I hope this is not temporary. I genuinely hope that she keeps an aspect of darkness within her moving forward, because it will make her character infinitely more interesting in my view, because she needs more flaws. She needs to struggle more with some darkness, as opposed to always being this preachy beacon of light all the time. That now again, that's my bias, but that's also why I love this plot point with this her being having this darkness.
No, you make a really good point. I think that I think the concepts of love and hope are best left to Superman, and I think that when they over integrate that into Wonder Woman, it just makes her feel kind of like a copy. I see the significance, and I think that what would make Wonder Woman more compelling is her trying her hardest to be loving and compassionate, but also struggling with the darker side of her past and of her origins. I really, I think Greg Rucka's run in particular certainly has a place to be one of the best, if not the best run in Wonder Woman's pantheon. But I do think that, along with many other people, that characters aren't interesting without adversity. And you don't want adversity solely in a physical combative sense. You want an internal and emotional adversity for a character to face. And that's what makes them more interesting and more compelling. And I do agree that sometimes when Wonder Woman is just this perfect, always rational being, it makes her kind of boring. The Wonder Woman that I like has problems of her own to deal with, just like Bruce, just like Clark, even though Clark less so. But when they make her the sole proprietor of love and hope in the DC universe, or they try to, it just feels too much like a female Superman, and they're
Yeah.
not letting her be her own character. But I'm really, I mean, I wonder if any like longtime Wonder Woman fans kind of like their jimmies were rustled by adding this level of mysticism into her origin.
I
I,
yeah,
I
I actually think that it probably it probably has ruffled a lot of feathers. I've been I've been an avid Wonder Woman fan for like I mean a long time, like well over 25 years, and I guarantee you Wonder Woman has a very eclectic, very vocal, probably one of the most vocal fan bases out there, and they're very protective, particularly of the George Perez sort of preachy Wonder Woman. They really love her to be sort of that beacon of the female version of Superman, really. And by the way, they very much resent the phrase female version of Superman. Their
yeah,
response would be, no, Superman's a male version of Wonder Woman, is what they would say. So they get very defensive. But I think you make a good point, and I actually agree with it. There's I'm just saying, it's flaws are what make the heroes interesting, and the hero's journey is what makes a story interesting.
agree.
And
I
if the
mean,
hero doesn't have any flaws and starts off perfect and is born perfect, made from clay perfect, and even Wonder Woman's idea that she's gifted the wisdom of Athena. Well, with all due respect, if I give you wisdom, doesn't that defeat the purpose? I
no,
mean,
it does.
Doesn't wisdom, aren't you supposed to gain wisdom through the application of knowledge over a period of time? That to me is what wisdom is. So if you suddenly are gifted it, how is that really heroic? You know, and just like in the recent pages of Wonder Woman, the issue 55 by Joe Orlando, Wonder Woman resolves the conflict not by the application of wisdom or something she does that's extraordinary. She just wraps her magic lasso against Rustam out of the fresh off the pages of Suicide Squad, and basically just the magical lasso makes him see a truth, and it's all done. It's like a Duke's Ex Machina, it's a cop out, and
Yeah.
it's a, it's I don't know. I I like her to earn her victories more than just have them handed it to her by a magic rope.
Yeah, no, I 100% see where you're coming from. I think that in terms of her continuity, I have much less of a stake than many people because my bulk of Wonder Woman reading came by way of DC Rebirth, and I've read her in quite a few Justice League stories before then. But Rucka I mean, to be fair, technically, actually, my first solo exposure to Wonder Woman was New 52 Volume 1 Blood. And I loved it. And again, there were always the semantics between the old time fans and the new school fans. But I think that something, like you were saying, it doesn't matter what character you're writing if they don't have a struggle within themselves. Everything on the outside doesn't matter because it's just filler. The thing, for example, the reason why Superman became popular again because he's struggling with being a father. He doesn't know how to be a father, and he's still learning, and he's trying to implement the teachings of his father, Jonathan Kent, but he no longer has that guiding force to
Yeah,
to to raise his son, and that's why he's more interesting. Batman has always had his a number of demons, over his shoulder to deal with, but Wonder Woman being this perfect icon of femininity and feminism, and again, this isn't a bash on feminism, is just it's corny. It's blatantly corny. And I think that there is a happy medium between what Rucka was doing and what Azzarello was doing, because Azzarello provides this sense of gritty realism, as real as you can get in a fictional landscape. But, I think that characters are to be built upon, that you can't just keep them static throughout and if you kept them static, they wouldn't last for the 80 years that they've lasted so far.
and
Whether or not different parts of their history were beloved by everybody is irrelevant. You have to do something. And the ones that end up being the best are the ones where you can still make big changes, but keeping the core of the character the same. You could make Wonder Woman struggle with abiding by her central focus of uh, I guess bringing love to the world, but make her struggle to do it. It shouldn't be an easy task. It shouldn't just be something as simple as pulling out her lasso and saying, "Love the world, be true to yourself," and all this other nonsense. She should struggle to try to maintain that. And that's what would make her compelling in this day and age.
yeah, and you know, and building on what you're saying, I'm just sort of like cheating and moving ahead. I'm not going to give any spoilers for Witching Hour, but what what is obvious, and it looks like Tinian's continuing to do it. When you talk about building up that character in those moments and working on the flaws and what have you, and making the character interesting, and that that middle ground between a Rucka and an Azzarello version of a Wonder Woman. What I'm impressed with Tinian with Justice League Dark is that he's managed to do that with at least or four of the characters already.
Mhm.
I'm more interested in Swamp Thing than I've been since the days of Alan Moore. With him wanting to give up his connection to the Green. That's fascinating to me. I'm interested in Constantine with the blood revelation. I'm
Mhm.
interested in Zatanna now because I got a new respect for her, and in terms of the struggles that she has, and in particular, by the way, I want to give a shout out to. I never knew why she spoke backwards, but it was such a cool revelation to know that the reason why they spoke backwards is so that when they do their magic, it's less likely to be detected by the dark forces of magic behind the source wall. I mean, that's a cool explanation, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's ridiculous, but that they're talking backwards to begin with. You know, but it's actually kind of a cool comic book explanation as to why they do that.
Well,
And
I also think too the way they explain that in the case of Zatanna and Zatara, they are using language as a conduit for magic. It's just like a wand or a staff or a spell book.
Yeah.
They language isn't just casting incantations. The language is the magic, which I think is really, really interesting, and it adds another layer to what Tynan's going to be building with the magical scape of the DC universe.
Yeah, which makes Zatara's training of his daughter Zatanna all the more fascinating, because he teaches her all that, and I love the way you put that with the language sort of being the wand, so to speak. But then he also trains Zatanna that, okay, now that you know that, now you know how to use the language, now now accomplish the same thing, but you're not allowed to use magic anymore. Why would he train Zatanna like that? Because he's training her for a time when magic might be gone. And that appears to be what might be happening now. Or something's happening. And it's just really interesting. I mean, I got to say, like, we're only 3 issues in. We're 3 issues in, plus Witching Hour. After Witching Hour, it's continued in the pages of Wonder Woman issue 56.
Mm.
And so far, I'm really impressed. And finally, I just I'm just so impressed. I hope Wonder Woman keeps an aspect of the darkness. I really, really do.
I agree, and I think that this Justice League Dark, if it continues on the path it's been going, I think it's going to be Tynan's magnum opus thus far. I think it's going to be the biggest and best thing he's written. He does everything well for me. It's not like there are some writers that go down in history for kind of having this one part, this one or two aspects to their story that are amazing, but Tynan has everything. He understands the characters, the dialogue is good, the storytelling is good, the implications of what's going on are interesting. There are real life connections you can make. Like he ties into kind of Snyder's thematic of having of like depression and not being able to overcome certain things because they seem too difficult. For example, when Constantine like uses that massive sigil and like tries to blow away the upside down man, he looks back at them unfazed and says, would you also attempt to throw a bucket of ocean water into a tsunami? Like, I think we had an understanding that the upside down man and whatever is coming from behind the berries or the source wall are powerful, but that analogy there is insane. Like, it's like throwing a bucket of water into a tsunami.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
and it's nuts to think about how powerful this guy is. And then even they had solicited that huge like the swamp thing, like fully embodying the elementalism of the green, and he has the horns and everything massive, and then the upside down man just like flick of the wrist destroys him. Like it's I'm really curious to see. And it also goes to show, again, spoilers for the end of the issue, when Wonder Woman is re-imbued with the power of those Themyscirian witches, she gets rid of him just as easy as he got rid of them. So the conflict with whatever is inside Wonder Woman is also another plot thread I'm really interested to see resolved.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I know. It's interesting, because if Wonder Woman has dark magic within her, well, actually, I don't know why I'm calling. Actually, I don't know why I'm calling it dark magic, because in fact it seemed to be a bright light. It's what came out of her at the end of Justice League Dark. It was a bright light that sort of pushed the darkness at bay. And yet I know that I think that ceremony that young Wonder Woman, I think that was a Hecate ceremony of the dark goddess Hecate, or if I'm saying that wrong.
Hecate, yeah.
Hecate, sorry, thank you. Hecate. I'm terrible with names, God. Hecate, I think that's because I think what's happened is, in reading the solicits, is that apparently the various humans on the planet, they're storing magic into secretly in various humans on the various people on the planet, and Wonder Woman happens to be one of them. But because she's Amazonian, I think that might be some special kind of magic that's being kept in check by her. And I'm assuming that it's a dark magic, but maybe it's not, or maybe Wonder Woman's power, because she has the magic lasso, is converting it into something else, which would prompt the Upside Down Man to say what he did before he was banished. He said things, he said, I think his comment was, things just got interesting, because it was the Upside Down Man that, curiously enough, he turned it on, like that he actually turned on Wonder Woman's powers, like, and he did so willingly, almost like he didn't really know it. He didn't appreciate what he was starting when he activated the magic.
I almost feel like too, because they had mentioned how powerful the Lords of Order were. I feel like whatever ceremony Wonder Woman walked in on has something to do with maybe like descendants of the Lords of Order, and because they were practicing extreme black magic. Also, one of the things was, I don't know if you remember, one of the final pages, the Upside Down Man is literally pulling the panel apart. Like, he is breaking reality. That's how powerful he is. It's right after Wonder Woman jumps in with her shield, and he's literally like he can break the bounds of space and time, and that's when he makes the comment on that there's something strange inside of Wonder Woman, and he chooses to turn it on.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Like, it's like the implications again. That's another implication of the Upside Down Man's power, and the huge hurdle that Justice League Dark is going to have to face.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see that. I think the panel you're referring to is there, where it looks like the panel is sort of everything sort of might be breaking the fourth wall. Yeah, that is interesting. And yeah, he says his comments are really, like, James Tynion does such a good job on dialogue here, just a really good job on dialogue. Curious, tell me, creature, what are you? And then even Wonder Woman's response, it sounds, you could just hear Gal Gadot's voice, like, right out of Wonder Woman. I am Diana, Princess of Themyscira, daughter of Zeus.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
I hear I still hear, I think it's Susan Eisenberg, the voice of Wonder Woman from the Justice League animated series. She's the voice that I hear when I
yeah,
read this. But no, nevertheless, I agree with you. The dialogue here and the way that Tynion writes these characters are absolutely superb.
yeah, it's interesting. Because I mean, the Upside Down Man. If the Upside Down Man is from from the old Lord, Lords of Order or whatever, he basically says it's a font of power, but it's foreign to me. So he doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
So whatever is in Wonder Woman, he's not aware of it, which is interesting. So if it is Hecate magic, that then why, you would think he would at least be aware of it, but he's not. And the fact that it seems to push him away is curious. And I'm gonna have to educate myself on this symbol, if that symbol there of Wonder Woman on her forehead, of the circle and the two quarter
Crescent
moons on the
moons,
side
yeah.
of it. I guess maybe that is the symbol of Hecate, I think. But I'll have
Yeah,
to.
that's entirely possible. I mean, it's one thing I find interesting too is how we had mentioned that they basically use words as a conduit, for magic. Here it's almost like there's pure magic stored inside Wonder Woman. And it could just be like the channeling of her godly essence, because she's a child of Zeus, and she's kind of using that sort of pure essence in partnership with, here where she uses the Zatanna's like magical language. Like, it feels like she's almost channeling like pure divinity. Maybe it's
Yeah,
not just magic, maybe they're tying magic into divinity, but it's almost like she's channeling pure divinity upon the Upside Down Man.
I
um
thought that's actually brilliant that you use that phrase divinity, because that is precisely one of the third or fourth, uh, the seven forces that Snyder's writing about in the Justice League. The next one's going to be, it's going to be juxtaposing Aquaman and Wonder Woman, because it's going to be talking about divinity versus magic.
hmm.
That's the interplay. That's one of the other forces. I think two of the other seven forces, I believe, is going to be the difference between the struggle between divinity and magic. which that would probably make a lot of sense. You know, if Wonder Woman is now, because Wonder Woman has always been a sense. Wonder Woman's always had a sense of the divine in her, in the sense that she's a demigod. She's the
Yeah.
Zeus is her father, so she's got that divinity in that respect. And so, but if Wonder Woman is now also part magic, then she that represents the interplay between the divine and magical. So that's a very good point.
I almost wonder if when she was kind of abducted and used in that ceremony, if the witches knew that there would come a day where they would have to kind of merge divinity and magic together, because it's incredible like what she's doing here. She even breaks kind of the bounds of reality. Like, one of the last couple pages here, she brings Constantine back. She removes the seal that kept Khalid Nasser inside that vase, brings back Bobo the chimp.
Yeah,
Swamp Thing comes back to life. So I
yeah,
wonder if it's like magic again. Like they're using magic to channel divinity. Like this is pure divine power, because I feel like magic doesn't really have the power to bring pure life. And they're even
that's
bringing
right.
back, like they're even like reviving a little bit more like whittled tree of wisdom. Is that what it's called? The tree of wisdom.
Yes.
um like it just looks like, I mean, it's obviously just a visual interpretation, but it's pure light energy, and so it feels like using dark magic to bring forth divinity. And I wonder if there's going to be some sort of conflict with those two essences inside of Wonder Woman kind of battling to take hold of her. um it's just overall, it's one of those things where I feel like, when you instinctively have a trust of a writer about how good they are. Because, for example, Williamson, what he's doing in Justice League Odyssey is kind of like, I don't know where you're going with this, and I'm a little bit skeptical. Here, I don't 100% know where Tynan's going with this, but I'm still really excited. I'm really excited to see what they do with this.
Well, he's got a really good handle on the characters here.
100%.
The only character that we haven't really known much about yet, but we gotta remember we're only 3 issues in,
Right.
and this is a team book. My God, he's developed 4 of the characters in this team book more, I would argue, than Bendis has with Superman in what, 12 issues between Action and Superman. And again, I don't. I'm picking on Bendis again, and I even enjoy Superman, but I do find it very interesting. I think James Tynion's done a really, really good job here, and the more we talk about it, honestly, the more we're talking about it, and I'm really glad you brought up that point about the divine and the magical. That just makes things infinitely more interesting in terms of Wonder Woman's character, and in terms of what it might mean for her character moving forward, and making her even more powerful and more unique from Superman and Batman, as a member of the Trinity, that divine aspect, and even maybe a little bit of the magical as well.
Yeah, I think that, just to kind of coattail off of that, James Tynion his understanding of these characters is fantastic. I think you had brought up even Bendis. I think he shows a better understanding of the characters than Snyder does, and I love Scott Snyder. Between what Snyder was doing in Metal and No Justice and Justice League, between all that, Snyder has like what? If you figure he wrote, I mean, so the 6 issues of Metal, plus 4 issues of No Justice, plus nine, well, technically 7 because Tynion wrote 2. I mean, that's what, about 22 issues Snyder has had to give us some sort of window to his understanding of the characters, and I haven't seen any of it. I don't think he understands many of the characters, and I think even the way he characterizes Batman has suffered for me greatly. And I'm not doing this to bash on Snyder. I'm doing this to accent the fact that Tynion understands these characters. Like, he's not writing them just to include them. He's writing these characters because he knows that they can each play a cohesive, fluid, integral role in the story he's trying to tell. And I really appreciate that, because it takes like this level of foresight, and planning,
Yeah.
that goes into this. And for those of you watching that haven't read Justice League Dark, go pick up on it. All you need to know going into the first issue of Justice League Dark is that the source wall is broken. and that
Yeah.
there's this tree of wisdom has appeared, on Earth. That's it. That's all you need to know. And throughout the story so far, I honestly like. I've reviewed, I think, the first issue, but I would give every single issue over a 9 out of 10. Like unapologetically and for sure, every single issue of Justice League Dark for me would be somewhere between a 9 and a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. I would, I would, I would even go so far as to say, well, I think this is an obvious point, but I don't think enough people are emphasizing it. Justice League Dark number 3 is an instant key issue. I think from a speculator standpoint, because I think DC is good. It would be foolish if they don't use this as a starting point to maybe change Wonder Woman's power set in some way, because I think it's a key issue now because it shows her first connection to some form of magic
I
outside of divinity.
I'd be really interested to see how that goes because it seems like largely DC Comics fans don't seem to be very receptive to changing, characters' power sets. Like when Superman got the solar flare, people were like, "Well, what the hell is this?" You'd thought he would have done it by now, or especially like when he had lost his powers temporary. People don't seem to be super receptive, and I can only feel like whatever happens with Wonder Woman's powers here is eventually going to be reversed, and that's also just knowing the cyclical nature of comics. But do you honestly feel like whatever they develop for Wonder Woman out of this arc is something that could stick for the long run?
Well, obviously that's the question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's hard to answer that. You and I can speculate. I I'll reiterate again my sincere hope that I just I like the idea of her having a little bit more of an internal struggle because I think Wonder Woman has had it very, 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 very easy. She's been gifted everything. When you're gifted, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel the same way about Shazam. I mean, if all you got to do to get all the powers and the wisdom and suddenly turn into a perfect body, perfect mind, perfect everything is simply say Shazam and suddenly you're Captain Marvel, whoop-de-doo. It's one of the reasons why I've always maintained Shazam has been, well, what makes Shazam interesting? It's his
Mm.
flaws. Why does Shazam have flaws? Because he's got the mind of a 10-year-old. That's what makes him interesting.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman in many ways is, you know, she's almost this doughhead naive woman. She's only 25 to 30 years old, depending on how you want to interpret continuity. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say she's 35. Give her 5 more years of wisdom. If what's the purpose of being 30 or 35 if you're suddenly gifted with wisdom anyway?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? Like, if you suddenly know all this, what's the purpose? What gives, why is Wonder Woman an ambassador to peace? She's 35 years old. What experience does she have facilitating peace between nations? I mean, seriously, that's never been explained to me. I've never understood it. At least under Azzarello had Wonder Woman be like, I think she was like 2,000 or 3,000 years old, I believe. So at least you could kind of understand it. You got many years of actual experience. But,
Hmm.
if you're going to have a perfect Wonder Woman, and if you're going to have, she's got the magic glass, she's got all this stuff to her, she needs to have some flaws that are, I think, permanent. There's got to be a permanent tape there in some way that she's constantly overcoming.
Well, I think that whatever what Azzarello did is probably still in continuity in some way. For me, I don't take anything out of continuity until it's like explicitly said that this or something explicitly like disproves that this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't say anything but positive things about Justice League Dark. This book's been great. The art's great too. Let's give credit where credit's due. Alvaro Martinez has never done better work. This is fantastic and putting him, he was good on Detective Comics, but now that he has a month versus 2 weeks to put out a book, man, this book is stunning. Brad Anderson colors, great as always, but
Yeah.
this is the book that I think Martinez is going to be remembered for.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm looking at the art here on Witching Hour, and wow, it's really good. I mean,
Who's on art for that book?
I I'm just trying to find the credit page here. Another one of these books. It says Tinian the four, and Marino and Fajardo Jr. And so here it is. Jesus Marino is the
Oh,
artist.
Jesus Marino. Yeah, I think he did. I think he did.
Jose Marino. Sorry.
I think he did some work on Detective with Tynan. I don't quite remember, but
But I
that
mean,
name
it's
sounds
really
familiar.
good art. Like it's really good. It's really good.
Hmm.
Um, I got a
No,
question. I got a question for you. Just a quick digression. What do you think of the paper stock for DC? I actually don't mind it, but some people are starting to complain they don't like it as like some of the other glossier. But I actually think the colors pop off the page. But
I
do you?
like it. It gives it a like kind of a retro feel to the comics. And if DC is really trying to approach the fact that they're rebuilding their universe and their multiverse, I like it. And I feel like it's probably a little bit more durable than
Yeah.
what they were using before. Um, but we are approaching like an hour and a half, so I do kind of want to touch on the main Justice League title, give our thoughts on where things have been going. Have
Yeah.
you read issue 9?
I got issue 9 here. I have not read it yet. Have you?
No, but I will say from what I understand, it's not doing some really heavy story development. It's just kind of a not a like kind of a break issue.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
but I feel like I've started the conversations with Justice League Odyssey and Justice League Dark. How are you feeling about the trajectory of the main Justice League title right now?
Well, I just I've got some. Well, I mean, not a lot has changed since we last spoke because we did one of these live streams after issue 8, and I have Scott Snyder's not James Tynion, and I think part of that,
It's
you and I just sat here and we sang the praises of James Tynion, and I fear that maybe we put him on a pedestal that
I
Scott Snyder can't
I
attain. But
I think that's also really ironic because if we had talked about this 5 years ago when Tynan was writing like random Batman annuals and whatever, we would have said James Tynan is not Scott Snyder. So it's really funny that like under a different context, the roles have been reversed.
yeah, if I here's my observation with Snyder, and I think this is why Snyder's not writing as good as Tynion right now. Tynion is much better at writing a team book than Snyder. What I find Snyder does, and I'll use an example. Snyder gets an idea in his head on a bit of dialogue, and he imagines a scene, and he will twist pages and pages to move toward the scene, and it really ruins his dialogue. I don't think Snyder. I just don't like his dialogue. He doesn't. It's choppy. The conversations between the Justice League members, I find, aren't as smooth as when James Tynion writes them in Justice League Dark.
Yeah, I'll
James
agree.
Tynion seems more relaxed. James Tynion. He seems more relaxed. He's letting the characters speak. It's almost like he's letting the characters write themselves. Whereas Snyder, there's a sense that he's trying to. I think he's trying too hard. If that makes any sense.
No, I agree. I think that the one of the biggest difference between the way these two guys are writing characters is that Tynan is writing stories for these characters. Scott Snyder is writing these characters to fit his story. And I think that
Good
like
point.
the mainstream blunder in characterization with Snyder is only second to what Bendis has been doing for DC, which bothers me largely. And I've talked about that a number of times. That's the thing too for Justice League. I love that they're really building towards something huge. But again, I cannot stick with the idea of characters being written for a story. You need to write stories around these characters. You know why? Because you're trying to develop a story that's new. You're not trying to develop characters that are new. These characters have existed for decades upon decades upon decades. Some of them for the better half of a century. And it's just it also stings because I was so beyond excited for Snyder to hop on Justice League, so it makes me a little bit bitter that I haven't loved everything so far. But I feel like, one of the things he's coming out to do is give you more for your money. And to be
Yeah.
100% honest with you, I would much rather have quality over quantity. If Snyder had to pace things out a little bit more and maybe have an extra issue or two to go through things and take time with these characters and develop them naturally, I don't give a shit. I'll
Yeah,
pay that extra $4, you know, to just to make this feel more cohesive. I know a lot of people are okay with it because they're getting more story in less time, but to be honest with you, I again, it's a quality over quantity thing. If I have to wait a little bit longer, I'm fine with it. That's why for me, like I largely didn't have a huge problem with Scott Snyder's Zero Year. I didn't because I felt rewarded every issue. I felt like something was happening and I understood what was going on the whole time. And you know
yeah,
what? Reading that book in trade, it's even better. You know, it's 10 to 12 issues between Zero Year Secret City and Dark City, and it's good. It's a solid story. And I was one of the people that, when reading along with it, didn't have a problem that it was slow. I got forgetful, but largely I prefer that style of writing over what Snyder's doing in Justice League in terms of the pacing.
yeah. I think I'm going to give. I I think that Snyder's still learning the ropes of pacing and just learning the ropes of writing a team book, because
Mm.
it has to be different than writing just an individual one when he's so accustomed to Batman. And I think that uh, I think I like to think that hopefully he's very open about how talented Tinian is. So Snyder would share a point of view that Tinian's pretty good at writing it, and he openly admitted that Tinian is there to help explain things
To,
after so many issues.
to
And
be fair,
so
he also said that from the beginning that what Bendis was doing on Superman was going to be legendary. So
yeah,
let's take that with a grain of salt at least.
well, I you know they're Bendis is a slow build. I mean, to me, if you're gonna to me, Bendis is like a fine wine, but you can enjoy it. But if you don't like wine, it doesn't matter how long you age the wine, you're not going to enjoy it, right?
I
So
will have to like I do disagree on the whole Bendis thing because I don't mind a slow build at all. You know, my first monthly title was Snyder's Batman, which largely had a slow build.
yeah,
I when you don't understand the characters, and I know we had a little bit of a disagreement where, you know, I had said that I think largely one of the best ways to show that you understand a character is through their dialogue, because that is the most active way that these characters communicate with each other.
yeah,
And when you just write, you know, and especially in Bendis's case, cockamamie dialogue, it just doesn't make sense, and it shows that you don't know how this character would react to things, because you know, an artist can give you a visual understanding and how the character's body language is portraying them, but their thoughts in the internal monologue and what they're saying in the dialogue, excuse me, um, that is the number one way to tell how to understand the character. And Snyder is just shows me that he doesn't really understand the Justice League, and even his characterization as Batman has suffered. And I think we saw a little bit of it in the beginning of All Star Batman. I thought that he wrote Batman a little bit too clumsily. You know, I think that he tried a little bit too hard to integrate the fun. And with Justice League, he's really going all out on that fun, but you're losing the character. And it makes me a little bit fearful of how he's going to handle Batman in his Black Label book with Greg Capullo. So, you know, I want Snyder to succeed, and that's why I criticize him so much. But I can't say that I'm loving Justice League. It's definitely a step up from what Brian Hitch was doing, but I honestly haven't loved an issue of Justice League since issue 1.
yeah. I'm just paging through issue 9, and it looks like he's sort of exploring the different rooms in the Hall of Justice, and it might there's a little bit more quieter moments between the characters, so it might be a more enjoyable issue. I don't know. I'm
I
just sort
hope
of, I
so.
glanced at it, so I think maybe we need a break like that. So it'll be interesting. So we'll see. I mean, honestly, I still say Snyder, he's a big name, but he made his big name writing Batman, and going from that to writing a team book, he can take some notes. He's on it for 50 issues. I like to think, and my fingers are crossed, that he can only get better. And because he did admit that he was throwing everything at the wall right out of the
Right.
gate. So his intention was to sort of overwhelm the reader a little bit and then sort of step back. And obviously, maybe I think you and I sort of are inclined to. We weren't big fans of that particular style of starting
Mm-mm.
a story out, as particularly when we look at Justice League Dark
It has
started off a
everything.
little. Yeah, I mean, it started off slower. I mean, I like Justice League Dark. Start off a little slower. I mean, Justice League Dark started with Wonder Woman having a drink with Bibbo the chimp
In the
at the
Oblivion Bar,
bar, for
yeah.
Christ's sake. I mean, to me, that was actually more of a more interesting way to start the story, than
Well,
than
I felt like the way that Tynan handled it with the smaller moments and then this like rapid crescendo into insanity was the way to do it. And I think I would have largely been okay with Snyder kind of throwing shit at the wall narrative wise, like what he's doing with the overarching story, if he showed that he understood the characters. You know,
yeah.
I can get it again if whatever larger proceedings are going on are moving a little bit quick and you're gonna kind of exposit on them later, that's fine. But the characters just were not being written well. It's and I it for me that isn't indicative of a rushed story. That's indicative of you either don't care how you're writing the characters because you're writing them to fit a purpose, or you just don't know these characters as well as you thought you did. And again, I feel like characterization is independent of story,
Yeah.
but when they work well together, it makes both of them better. You know what I mean? And that's why, I think since issue 1, and again excluding the issues that Tynan wrote, I don't think I've been able to give Justice League more than like a 7.5 if I'm being generous out of 10. I really do hope that what he's saying about him, kind of delving a little bit deeper into things and being a little bit more expository is true. But I am cynical, as we talked about in a previous conversation. I take everything with a grain of salt that these creators are saying online, because they will support books that are just inherently bad. And while I can appreciate their supporting their peers and it builds a great community around it, I just rather not be lied to. So I've been taking that with a grain of salt, and I say that with the most respect to Scott Snyder. But he'll promote things that his friends write, whether or not it's good.
Yeah, I actually find I'm just paging through Justice League #9 now, and I find the art. I find Jorge Jimenez's art to be better than it was in his earlier issues, as well, because I'm not generally a big fan of Jimenez as an artist, but this issue is beautifully drawn. I really like. He's definitely exploring different ways. I don't know the language of an artist in terms of all the different techniques or what have you, but there's something about it that really sort of pops off the page. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of detail here. He draws a beautiful Hall of Justice, just beautiful, and a gorgeous scene of Batman's legs healing that were broken in previous issues, and a beautiful cafeteria scene where the heroes are eating, and it's yeah, it's pretty good.
No, I
It's
think I think the
artistically it is.
I think visually, yeah, the artwork has been pretty spectacular in Justice League. I will say that I think Jim Chung needs to probably spend a little bit more time drawing the DC characters like DC characters. They feel very Marvel. And if you were to compare this to something like his work on Infinity, I think his artwork on Infinity is leaps and bounds better than what he's doing here.
Yeah.
I'm hoping Jim Chung just gradually gets better, but I found that between, for example, issue 1 and what was it, issue 7 that he got back on the book, there was actually a bit of a decrease in quality. And I don't know if that's because he's not consistently drawing the Justice League, but Jimenez is great. I love Jimenez's artwork. I've had a few nitpicks here and there in like these middle in between issues, but I think that this is going to help develop him even further, because he is a huge rising star in the comic book industry right now. And I think kind of like what Justice League did for Jason Fabok and his artwork, this is going to mature Jimenez into a bona fide superstar artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I have. Yeah. Overall, I have to say that artistically, artistically, the Justice League books are in very good hands, and I love the mixture. My favorite though in terms of artistic rendering, well, it's hard to say, but overall in terms of the complete package. I think we both agree that Justice League Dark is
Oh, it's the cream of the
definitely
crop.
pretty good. And you know, it's funny because in some reviews I just did last week, I actually said my new favorite Justice League title was Justice League Odyssey, and because only because of the potential I see there in terms of I wasn't I'm after the first issue of Justice League Dark compared to how I felt after the reading the first issue of Justice League Odyssey. I'm more excited about Justice League Odyssey, but 3 issues in with Justice League Dark and looking at Witching Hour special that came out this week, I'm Justice League Dark is definitely has I got to rank it up, especially after we've talked about it here, and I never realized how impressed I was with Justice League Dark until we started talking about it. To be honest with you, so
It's
now I'm sort of changing my mind on that.
it's
Uh,
such a good book. I
yeah,
mean, Justice League Dark is it's been a breakout book for me because, to be honest with you, the mystic realm of the DC universe has always been one of those things that I've been interested into getting into, but it's been difficult for me to get into because there's so much behind it, and it felt a little bit inaccessible, and I was always really confused because I don't have a lot of knowledge of the different like mythologies and stories that are being pulled in from like I guess real world uh concepts. You know, for example, a lot of the stuff they talk about in Constantine and Hellblazer books with, you know, these different, you know, oddly like very specific ceremonies or using like kanji or other forms of a cultural black magic craft. But Tynan makes this feel really accessible to me.
yeah,
As he finds a good way at pulling in a new reader and also bringing a lot of ties in from, you know, what has made the DC Magic universe so big. There's everything about Justice League Dark for me right now is just really hitting it. Again, he hits all of the major aspects of storytelling. There's the characters, you know, he understands these characters. The larger narrative is really interesting, and the implications that are arising from the narrative he's crafting are mysterious and you know they're like I guess the word to use are astounding. Like whatever is going on here, I know is gonna be huge between what he's doing with the Upside Down Man or the power that we've now learned is within Diana. You know, I would almost hope that Tynan would get his hands on the main Justice League book at some point, but I also don't want his time on Justice League Dark to end. So it's gonna be kind of a double-edged sword.
yeah. And I will say we sort of went off talking about Justice League Dark again. But I will say I actually like the idea. I'm curious to know who this Perpetua woman is that Scott Snyder wrote about. You know, just at the end of Justice League 8, this embodiment. She apparently she was this figure that embodied the seven forces, and she, you know, you got to wonder if she's trapped in the totality. Once she's released, is she, you know, we are assuming that she must be evil, and if she is, what role is she going to play? The Batman Who Laughs referenced her, and I openly wonder if Darkseid knows about Perpetua. Did Darkseid's father tell him about the story of Perpetua? Uh, you know, before became part of the Source Wall. It's really interesting in terms of where that's going to go, and also exactly what's going to happen to the Batman Who Laughs, because the Batman Who Laughs, he was released,
Mm.
and now he's basically free, and he's free to do what he wants. And to me, that's a wild card that you don't want out. You know, doing. Basically, the Batman Who Laughs is basically Bruce Wayne, an evil Bruce Wayne, and that's a pretty scary concept.
No, it's really interesting to see where that's going to go. And to be honest with you, I'm far more excited about Snyder going back to his horror roots with Jock on that Batman Who Laughs mini. I don't know if it's a mini or a maxi series than I am about Justice League right now. But you know, I do retain some level of hope that what Snyder said is true, and that we're going to start kind of getting a little bit not grounded, but getting a little bit more into the characters in Justice League and getting a little bit of an understanding of what their stake in all of this is. Um, but and again, I might be a little bit biased because I was hoping for a little bit more out of my Justice League, especially being written by Snyder. But I will continue to read it and pick up the book to see what's going on, and I hope 6 months from now I'm eating my words. I really do.
Yeah, no. I hope so too. I really hope that they bring more that that some greater clarity comes to the table, and we'll have to see. I'm just, yeah.
No, well said. Well, I mean, we've been going on for over an hour and a half now. I think this is a pretty good place to stop. We touched on all three Justice League books, and just to reiterate, how we were talking about the potential of maybe the individual threats between the three Justice League books, kind of like banding together to face the heroes of the multiverse. And I wonder if I can only feel like this is going to lead towards another crisis, because even in the Flash, they've implemented the notion that like the Hall of Heroes still exists, that within like the bleed of the multiverse, and we're getting the flavors of the old gods, potentially Superman Prime. I can only suspect that this is all coming towards some sort of crisis, and maybe it's also, I don't know, maybe it has some sort of tie to what's going on with Doomsday Clock. But there's definitely a feeling of something large in scale going on that is way above the heads of each of these three books individually. I'm interested to see where it goes. I hope it pans out positively. And I again, I hope more than anything that Scott Snyder can kind of redeem himself, and because I want more than anything for Snyder to put himself up on the pedestal with Grant Morrison for one of the greatest Justice League writers of all time. But that also doesn't mean I'm going to cut him any slack when he doesn't do something properly.
Yeah, I hear you, and I just want to give one shout out to J. Willow Wilson. Starts writing Wonder Woman, I think, at issue 57 or 58, and her plot line involves Grail, because right now, Darkseid's daughter Grail, we can't forget about her. She's actually trapped with Ares in that tree on Themyscira, and we have to remember that Ares is a willing captive. Ares willingly put himself into captivity on Themyscira in that sort of tree, whatever that tree was, and because he's basically protecting mankind basically from himself, essentially. And if Grail, I mean, here's my thinking, that apparently Grail has some influence on Ares, and Ares changes his perspective on something, and you can bet that the result of that probably is not going to be too good for Wonder Woman. But I'm also thinking to myself that if the source wall is broken and we have all these dark gods and multiple new dark forces coming into play, why would Ares, like, I think Ares has an ego. Ares hid himself away from humanity. He's a willing captive on the idea that he's protecting humanity from the darker forces of war, which are embodied within him. He must think to himself, well, what's the point of being in hiding when there's even worse forces than me that are going to be influencing humanity? I might as well come out and play. And now that's just me speculating, but Grail is pretty good at using sexual manipulation. Grail did sleep with Jason, Wonder Woman's brother. She's a manipulator. She's a killer. She's a deceiver, and I can see her manipulating Ares and vice versa. And I think it can really get interesting, and I'm really curious to see what J. Willow Wilson does. And I think that also is going to play a part in this larger scheme of characters adding to this rich tapestry of a crisis brewing slowly in the DC universe.
I mean, I would even posit that Ares didn't have a change of heart. I think that him being in that tree, potentially knowing that Grail was going to be there with him, was part of his agenda. I think that he wanted to be with Grail in the tree for whatever is going to come next. But no, I am interested for a little bit of fresh blood on Wonder Woman and again on Aquaman. I honestly, like, if my LCS if my LCS were better at reading my pull list, I wouldn't have picked up the Orlando stuff. I did not want to waste money on Orlando writing Wonder Woman because I'm not going into that, but let's just leave it there. I did not want to do that, and I was going to pick back up for the Witching Hour. But I am glad to see, hopefully, some fresh blood on Wonder Woman. Gia Willow-Wilson has spent a lot of time over at Marvel, and I hope that her and Kelly Sue DeConnick will prove themselves better than Bendis has thus far coming over to the DC. So I'm excited for those books. I really am, and I kind of like where when I get into those moments where I can be excited for books that I'm not normally super excited about. It's really weird that I'm probably more excited for Aquaman than I am for Batman right now. But I will say that I don't dislike. Again, I will leave it at this. I don't dislike what Tom King is doing in this current story arc. It's not bad.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Tom King, the Batman Catwoman Wedding Album Deluxe Edition, which I think it's very interesting because I got a slightly different perspective. Because it reproduces very key issues that Tom King thinks is important to understanding the wedding, and it reproduces very specific issues of Batman. And reading it through all the issues that he thinks are the most important, it gave me a slightly different understanding of what he was trying to say. And it reproduces Batman issues 24, the engagement, issues 44 of the dress, and then the big day issue 50. And it's all with the idea of sort of focusing on Tom King's interpretation of the characters, and it's actually pretty good. And it reinforces what I've said about Tom King before, and I'll say it again. Reading the issues in isolation from each other actually does him more credit, because reading him as a whole, you can see maybe the story break down more than he probably intended.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's ironic. Ironically, Batman being the biggest character in the DC universe has like the least foothold in the grand scheme of the DC universe right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. Tom King's kind of getting right in his own bubble. I hope he pulls things up. I haven't been disappointed with the last two issues of Batman, or the last issue of Batman, I should say. Did not love the cucumber issue. But with that being said, I did want to kind of put this video to a close because it seems like we've come to the end of our Justice League discussion. I'm really curious to what you guys watching now, or whether you're watching it later after it's been posted on YouTube. Let me know in the comments, what out of the 3 Justice League titles, what's been your favorite so far, or what are you most excited for between the 3 of them? Are you excited for when they finally cross over together? Are you excited for the individual climax of the 3 groups? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're not already, make sure you go subscribe to Comic Boom. You can find the link in the description down yonder. I'm sure at some point I'll put an annotation up on the screen right about now. So you can go straight over his channel, subscribe, watch his videos. He's good people. And if he wasn't, I wouldn't make time to talk to the gentleman throughout the week. So is there anything you want to let the good people of the internet know?
No, other than to watch your channel, DarkKnightNation. It's very good, and to keep an eye on you, because I assume at the New York Comic Con you'll be doing some interviews.
Yeah, so I am going to New York Comic Con this weekend, and I guess I can announce this now because everything's been set up. I've been in contact with DC Comics. I've been very fortunate, and they've been very good to me, and they've set me up with a couple of interviews, namely right now Robert Venditti. I'll be doing an interview with Friday night. I probably won't post it until next week. I will also be doing a vlog of and some sort of coverage of New York Comic Con, the events, what's going on. And I've also, DC Comics again has been gracious enough to grant me some press passes to a couple of panels. And I may or may not be able to meet Jeff Johns and talk to him a little bit. So I'm really, really excited for that. And again, DC, if for some reason you're watching my Ricky Dink YouTube channel, again, thank you for the opportunity to do this. I'm super excited for what's coming. And if you guys haven't already, I put up a review of Batman Damned, which is doing pretty well as of, 2 days beyond the post date, I'm over 800 views, which for a channel as small as me is pretty solid. So let's hope
Awesome.
that that can break 1,000 sometime soon. And I probably will be doing some sort of review of Heroes in Crisis issue 1 within the next couple weeks. I definitely won't have time because I'm leaving for New York tomorrow. But um so is it to summarize what is coming up for me? Interviews with Robert Venditti, potentially someone else, but I don't want to mention it until I got that for certain. Um, some coverage of the con and potentially some insight from the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Johns himself. And I will be also attending via press pass the DC All Stars panel, which I think is going to have, I don't know for certain, but I think is going to have all of the people writing like the big Justice League titles and each of the big 7 members of the Justice League titles and where they're going to be going from here. So I'm really excited to check that out. And if you guys haven't already, definitely make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for all that stuff we have coming up. And as we, approach 100 subs, which to some people might not be much, but to me is going to be huge, we will probably be doing some sort of giveaway. So thank you guys for watching. Comic Boom, man, thank you for making time. I know you've been
Thank you.
crazy busy, so it's always a pleasure chatting with you. And thank you to everybody who's watching this live and to those of you who are watching recorded later. I appreciate all the support, and make sure to go check out Comic Boom again. Great guy. And with that being said, I think we will sign out for the night. So
All
you
right.
guys have
Thanks,
a good one.
Dark Knight.
Thanks, brother.